And I think sometimes we have to remember, like, this is where people make their memories. You know what I mean? It's not just, hey, I'm buying a home because I want to build equity. Like, the average homeowner isn't thinking about equity. They're thinking about, like, this is where I'm going to raise my family. This is where my dog's going to run in the backyard. This, you know what I mean? Like, this is where we live our lives.
Welcome back to Good Better Broker as we bring in Kristin O'Neill. She is a mortgage broker with Open Door Lending, and she is based in Richmond, Virginia. Kristin, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations are in order, Kristin, because earlier today, you got the Dominate shirts.
Thank you.
What a day to record Good Better
What
Broker,
an exciting
right?
day, yes.
It's all about you. Well, even more about you, Kristin. You have been in the industry since 2008. You are a top LO in the state of Virginia. And last year in 2025, you did 149 units, which is noteworthy, not just because of the number, but because you were disappointed that you came up one shy of 150.
Yeah.
Which means you're super
I will make sure
competitive,
this
right?
year, yeah. With myself, mainly. Yeah.
That's a good thing. Likewise, you and I are on the same page there. You do so many things well. I want to start the conversation, though, by asking you about focusing on your clients' long-term goals, and especially with a mortgage, which, you know, so oftentimes prioritizes what's going on in the here and now. Why is that an area of emphasis for you?
I think, you know, obviously buying a home is just so emotional, and everybody is focused on, like, how do we get from point A to point B in the next 30 days? And, like, a lot of times we're not thinking about, like, well, what does that mean in 5 years or 10 years? And obviously the short term is really important, but I think just the nature of when I got into the business has really kind of shaped the way that I focus on education with my clients. You know, I was, 21 years old when I got into this business. I never had a mortgage. I didn't know what a good rate from a bad rate was. And, you know, I pretty much got like 2 months before the market crashed. And, you know, I had so many people calling me that really needed help, and I wanted to help so badly, but they were, you know, either underwater, had already missed late payments. So I think I am always so cautious to make sure that the decisions that my clients make are going to set them up for success in the future too. Like, I look at a mortgage as, you know, basically a vehicle towards generational wealth. Like, that's, you know, I think very few people can buy a home in cash, and obviously real estate is an amazing way to build wealth for, you know, for yourself, for your family, you know, for investments. And I think that's why I'm so cautious to really try and pause for a minute and, like, make them slow down and think about, like, well, is this a home that you would maybe rent out in the future? Like, could you see this being an investment property? Because if so, we might want to structure this differently than we would if you're just, hey, we're going to be here for 2 years and then we're going to sell it. Or, how long do you plan on staying in the home? You know, what are your long-term goals? Because I think a lot of times that does change the way that we will structure a file, structure a loan. And like I said, I think I'm just overly cautious because I've seen what can happen when people don't plan for the future. You know, I mean, obviously 3 years ago, everybody's like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, just get into the house, you know, buy the house, date the rate, and we'll get you refied in, 6 months. And I'm really thankful that I didn't take that approach, because obviously here we are 3 years later and the rates really haven't dropped, right? So, like, I always am optimistically cautious, you know what I mean? Like, and I'll tell my clients this, I'm like, obviously, if we can get you into a better situation in the future, amazing. But I want to make sure that the day that you close, that you are comfortable with that payment, you're comfortable with the terms, not that you're just like, okay, this is a Band-Aid hoping that we'll get into something better in the future, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, you could have like job loss, you know, your credit score could change, your equity could change. So I think that's why I'm like, overly cautious, like I said, and just making sure that I am making them think long term, when a lot of times it's just like, I don't care what kind of loan I get, I want the house, you know what I mean? So I think that's probably part of where that stemmed from.
Couple things about what you just said. First of all, it's a great point, because a year in the mortgage industry and in this market seems like it's a decade, right? Mm-hmm. It just seems like an eternity, the way things evolve so quickly. But I want to go back to the point you made about how emotional this process can be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, anything tied to finances, especially when it's the largest purchase someone's ever going to make, is going to bring out emotions. Mm-hmm. Then you throw in the fact that a home is such an aspirational purchase for everybody. How do you help your clients navigate the emotions of that process?
I think it's going to be emotional no matter what. You know what I mean? It's a huge huge purchase. For most people, probably the largest purchase they'll ever make in their life. And I think there's a lot of emotions tied to it. Like just the nature of the industry that we're in, like we look at housing as an asset. And I think sometimes we have to remember, like, this is where people make their memories. You know what I mean? It's not just, hey, I'm buying a home because I want to build equity. Like the average homeowner isn't thinking about equity. They're thinking about like, this is where I'm going to raise my family. This is where my dog's going to run in the backyard. This, you know what I mean? Like this is where we live our lives. So of course it's going to be emotional, but I really try and like flood my clients with as much knowledge as I possibly can, like, and really educate them, because I think that is where a lot of emotion stems from, is the not knowing, right? Like the nerves of, I've never done this before, I might never do it again. You know what I mean? So I think as long as they have the information, like I am not a salesperson by nature. I'm really not. Like I think that most people can make their own decisions if they're provided with the information. And of course you'll have clients who want your input on like, well, if it was you, what would you do? And I will, give my advice there. But for most people, like they can make the decisions if they have all the information in front of them that they need. And I think that helps to kind of like de-escalate those anxious emotions. Like obviously we want all the happy, excited emotions, but it's that like, am I getting in over my head? You know what I mean? Are we going to be able to make this payment? And I think as long as they have all the information, it kind of helps to ease that part of it.
So when it comes to educating your clients, which you just mentioned you love to do, how do you go about making sure they know what they need to know without making them feel overwhelmed?
Yeah. So obviously, since I've started, like the industry has changed so much and you kind of have to adapt. I think we used to be the front line in terms of answering questions, where now most people have already done so much research online before they've come to you. They've looked at TikToks, they've looked at Instagram, you know what I mean? And everybody's giving them advice. And it's almost like an overwhelming amount of information. They're on like AI and, all this stuff, which is amazing. I think that they have so much information at their disposal, but it can also be almost like information overload. You know what I mean? Like you're researching programs that don't even pertain to you. You know what I mean? There's no point in you researching USDA loans if you don't want to live somewhere rural. You know what I mean? So it's almost like there's too much information. You know what I mean? So we almost have to like pick through that. And it's sometimes hard, like I said, because they already come to you with a certain like misconception of what they think the best program is going to be for them. And I'll have a lot of times people ask me like, well, what's the best loan program? And I always am like, well, there's not really a right or wrong answer. It's something that's so specific to each individual, what your credit score is, what you want your down payment to be. And that's, like I said, I love the fact that a lot of people are doing so much research. Like, I think that's great that they're educating themselves, but I think also it can sometimes be really overwhelming.
It's a great point you make about there's no such thing as the best loan for me. And that's why you make a point to lay out multiple options for your borrowers based on their individual situation, right?
Yeah, I think and even if I know where they're going to end up, I will still give them all the options so they know that they were informed, you know what I mean? That they knew the difference between FHA and conventional and the pros and cons. And like I said, even if it's, a borrower who I know will probably end up being a conventional borrower just because their credit score and their down payment, I still want them to know, like, we knew what the options were and this is the best option for us.
How do you go into a conversation with a client and get a grip on their short and long-term goals? Because as you were saying a few minutes ago, that heavily impacts what kind of a loan you're going to put them into.
Yeah. So this is, I think there's so much that with technology that's great, but there's some things that make the job harder, right? Like we used to, a lot of times my clients would come into the office, we'd sit down for an hour and a half and talk about their goals. Or I'd be taking their application over the phone and we would have a long conversation about, how many kids they had, like how many bedrooms they want. Where now everybody is so like, hey, can you just text me an application? Can you email me the application? Which is great in terms of like their time savings, but it also sometimes makes it difficult to like really hone in on what their goals are. Like, somebody will fill out the application and they put in, I want my monthly payment to be $2,400, but we don't know where they got that number, where that stemmed from, like, what other expenses they might have that aren't on their credit report. So that can sometimes be harder almost now that I think so much is electronic to really like get to know your clients on that level. So even if I have somebody who doesn't have time to like spend the time up front and they just need a really quick pre-approval, I will still try once I get that application to like set up a follow-up call and just make sure that what they're telling me their goals are like actually align with what they want. And like I said, that I think has been I love where the industry is going with technology, but it's hard sometimes to adapt because you don't always get to know people on the same level that you used to when somebody was, meeting with you 2 or 3 times in a month time span and coming into the office and, the whole thing. So
on the subject of information overload, I want to ask you about the market because you can't help but see things about what's happening with rates if you're online and doing any kind of research into the market. And for you, it's a very intentional approach to keep things positive no matter what's going on with rates. Explain what you do with that.
So obviously the last couple of years, like we've been in a higher rate environment than we were in previously. Now rates are still pretty much at historic lows, but compared to where we were, they're obviously a little bit higher. And I'll be honest, this business it's a much of mindset for me. Like if I am negative and talking negative about like, well, rates are high and nobody's going to want to buy, it's like, you're going to start to believe that, you know what I mean? And there's always people that need your help, no matter what the market is dictating. People need to, like they need to downsize for whatever reason. They're moving for job relocation. Maybe they need a larger home. Like, so there's always going to be people who need to make changes, whether it's purchasing a new home, refinancing an existing home. And I think we almost get in our own way, right? Like, I could look at a client who's at, 6th and 8th and be like, well, they don't need a refinance. Like the rates aren't that much lower, but you don't really know what their needs are until you've talked to them. So I think sometimes like not talking ourselves out of it. And like I said, just staying positive and really figuring out like, can we still help you achieve your goals with where the market is right now? And if not, that's okay. Like maybe right now I believe that everybody can be a homeowner, but I'm not somebody who thinks everybody needs to buy a house right now, right? You know what I mean? Maybe it's not the right time. And maybe we just set you up on a plan for success for 6 months to a year from now, So, it's tough. Like, of course, obviously headlines, like negative headlines get clicks, and that's what, you know what I mean? That's what they're intended to do. They want people to open it and see, rates are the highest they've been, or rates have jumped up, and, and that's where they're getting people to engage. And a lot of it's not true. You know what I mean? So, obviously affordability, I think, is an issue as a whole in the country. Like there's no way around that. Like home prices have shot up in the last couple of years. But I think as long as you can still help people achieve what they want and have it be comfortable for them, like that's all that really matters, You
said that it may not be a yes right now. It could be let's wait and see and then revisit this down the road. That ties back to your action plan that you do with certain clients. Walk me through what an action plan looks like if somebody is not ready to buy right now, but you are looking at 6, 12, 18 months down the road.
Yeah, so there could be a bunch of reasons, why somebody maybe wants to wait. Like maybe, they're self-employed and they've just started their business and they need to wait until they've had, that 2-year history. Maybe they need to work on their credit a little bit. Maybe it's just a matter of I'm like not in a position right now where I feel comfortable physically moving, because of things that I have going on in my life. So I mean, I would say for the most part, like the majority of times when I talk to a client, they know that they usually want to, it's their goal to purchase within the next year. But there's a lot of times where they're like, we just want the information. Like we might be a year or two out. And I'm 100% fine with that. Like I think a lot of times clients think that they shouldn't reach out to you until they're ready to buy immediately. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like I don't care if you buy in 5 years from now. I think the more information you can have and the sooner you can get that information, the better. And I also think there's so many people who think that this is unattainable, but once they actually run the numbers and kind of talk through it with you, they're usually qualified for so much more than they would think they are, or, the payments are much more affordable than they were expecting, but they don't really know that until they have that initial conversation. So I think just leaving the door open that like, I am not going to make you feel like you need to make a decision right now, but I'm always here as a resource if you have questions anytime, really.
And I think that that's such a valuable thing to do, because when you were saying that, I was kind of putting myself in the shoes of a first-time home buyer. I would probably be hesitant too to reach out to a mortgage loan originator if I wasn't ready right now, because I would think, oh, they're going to try to sell me. They're going to try to make me do this sooner than I want. But you're saying that's the exact opposite of the way that you should be doing it.
Yeah, I think like I said, especially because there's certain things that we can, if we have the time, like especially credit. I think credit's a big one. If you have, less than perfect credit, it's really tough if you have to be out of your apartment within 30 days. But if we had spoke a year ago, we probably could have gotten the score where it needed to be, no problem. And I think there's a lot of things that, especially finances in general, especially if people are worried they're not going to be approved or qualified, that they're hesitant to kind of like bring that to light. And I always tell everybody I talk to, I'm like, you're not dealing with a computer, right? This isn't like, approved or denied. Like you're never denied. It's just, hey, maybe this isn't going to work right now, but this is what we need to do so that we can set you up for success in the future,
It just seems to me like you approach your clients in those conversations like you would with anybody else in your life. It seems like you have this innate ability to relate to them in what they're going through. Where does that come from? Is that something that just comes natural to you, or has it developed over your years in the business?
I think it's probably developed. I also think like I am somebody who doesn't like to be sold. Like if I walk in to buy a car and I feel like somebody's trying to hard sell me, I will walk out. Like I don't like that. And I think there are people out there who need that. They know that they need somebody to push them a little bit, right? And those are probably not the clients that are going to gravitate towards me. You know what I mean? So I'm just not a salesperson by nature. Like it's so uncomfortable for me. Like I said, I think, for the majority of people, like as long as they have the information, like they can make that decision without me telling them, hey, this is the option you should go with. You know what I mean? And obviously I try and educate and lead them in the right direction, but, I'm just not a salesperson. Now, my husband might differ and say like, I'm very pushy to other people in my life, but not to my clients. You know what I mean? Like my friends and my family, they'd probably be like, that is not the person we know. But when it comes to this, just because I don't think anybody can force you into that decision. You know what I mean? And typically if I have people in my life or just people that I've met where they have been kind of like pushed to make a big financial decision like that, they usually have some regret after, you know what I mean? If they weren't ready and bought too soon. So the timeline's going to be different for everyone.
A couple other things I want to touch on with you. Small business owners. You mentioned this a few minutes ago. This is an area that you've kind of grown attached to in helping these entrepreneurs and small business owners in your community, helping them get the financing they need. What about that appeals to you most?
Yeah, so I think this probably started years ago where I would talk to small business owners where they had been denied at their bank, you know what I mean? Or they just weren't given the information. They were like, obviously, one of the benefits of owning your own business is that you have a lot of tax write-offs, right? Which is not always conducive to applying for financing. So I think just educating them on like what that means. And I think I just gravitate towards people that have that like entrepreneurial spirit. So I think I just get along with those clients really well. I also love like supporting small businesses. Obviously as mortgage brokers, like that is what we preach, right? Like shop local, buy local, work with a local lender, work with a local broker. So it's almost like it would be contradictory for me not to then try and give back to local businesses in the community, and it's kind of funny because when you and I had originally talked, I was saying I like used to love reading tax returns. Like that was my special sauce. Like, other loan officers like did not know how to properly read tax returns in order to qualify clients. They were denying clients who were well qualified. And obviously that is just like anything else in this industry, something that you have to adapt. Like that's not really my special sauce anymore because with technology, we have income calculators, you can be brand new in this business and very quickly calculate self-employment income. You know what I mean? So it's changed. Obviously we have TBD scenarios and like very quick ways where it would take me if somebody owned multiple businesses, it would take me 2 days to go through their tax returns. You know what I mean? So, I think just having to adapt to basically, I guess what I'm saying is if there's something you're passionate about, just lean into it. You know what I mean? And you can figure it out, especially now with there being so much technology. You don't have to have all the answers. You know what I mean? Like there's so much information at our disposal now. Like I used to read through pages and pages of guidelines. You don't have to do that anymore. You know what I mean? You can search it. So as my kids say, search it up. Search it up. So, I think that is something, but I just, like I said, something about working with small business owners I love. And it seems that at least I'm very fortunate in Richmond. We I just think the city really supports local business, and a lot of the small business owners are also friends. So they refer you to their friends that have, different restaurants or, different types of small businesses. So kind of just snowballs, I think. And like I said, more than anything, it's probably just that I gravitate towards those people. You know what I mean? I love working with people who are creative and just have a different vision.
Well, like you said, technology certainly helps, and people can now jump into this business and be successful in a much shorter amount of time. But I will say this, Kristin, they cannot replicate the experience that you have, and it just seems like you have an amazing feel for how to work with different people and help them achieve those short and long-term goals. So my hat's off to you for the way that you treat your clients, which obviously is the way that you would treat someone who's in your family. And we appreciate you joining us to share some of those best practices with us. Kristin O'Neill with Open Door Lending and the Dominate winner. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you for watching Good Better Broker and helping us support independent mortgage brokers everywhere. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified about new videos, as well as your preferred podcast platform for a new episode every other Tuesday.